Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, and just as a quick heads up, this is not a budget deck, although I do think it should be fairly easy to find substitutes for those expensive cards. But before that, just a quick reminder to please click like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers, and every single click counts. And today's deck is going to be centered around the Celestial Toymaker. For 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, it's a legendary creature, Rogue Artificer 2/4 with whenever the Celestial Toymaker attacks, look at the top 3 cards of your library, exile any number of them in a face down pile and the rest in a face up pile. Defending player chooses one of those piles, put that pile into your hand. And at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses 2 life for each spell or ability that caused one or more players to guess or to group cards or permanents into a pile this turn. So this is super awesome. I've never seen a commander with such a weird and unique set of conditions. I do wish the payoff was a little bit more fun than just opponents losing life, but I do like that you've got this really wacky condition that wants you to put all of these guessing cards and piling cards into a deck. It's just going to be really fun, and it's going to make for very unique play and very interactive gameplay, which, as you know, I'm all about. The other cool thing about this commander is that as more Magic sets get released, it's guaranteed to get better, because there aren't that many cards that do this kind of effect, but they do tend to print one every couple of sets, so it's always going to have new additions every now and then, and it's not just going to be side grading some cards like most other decks are. You're going to actually get to add a new thing to this deck almost every set. In any case, let's get started, and we're starting off with Archaeomancer. This is a good way to return a lot of our instants and sorceries to hand. As you'll see, we have a lot of those in the deck. Archmage Emeritus is there because, again, we do have a lot of instants and sorceries, so this allows us to keep getting gas. Atris, Oracle of Half-Truths, is our first pile-based card, and it's a very good one that actually allows our opponents to mess with us a little bit because one of the piles is face down. Auton Soldier is a super powerful card that's going to come in and copy our commander. We are only going to get 1 extra attack and 1 extra end step trigger from this because unfortunately the copies don't really work well with that kind of timing, but it's still a solid addition. Bloodletter of Aklazots is very powerful because it's going to double all the life that people lose from our commander's ability. If we have a couple of copies of our commander out, since we're running a minus copy sub-theme, then this is going to be a very powerful effect. Dazzling Sphinx is a card that fits very well with the theme of the deck. We're going to be stealing cards from our opponents, and we don't know what we're getting, but it should always be something fun. Golem's Scheming Guide is a card that I really like lately. I put it in most of my black decks, but it fits perfectly here because your opponent is going to have to guess, so this counts towards our commander. Keen Duelist, you probably don't need me to explain at this point. It's in every black deck I make, and in this deck it's particularly good since we have a lot of ways to deal non-combat damage to our opponent, and particularly with Bloodletter of Aklazots, it can deal a lot of damage. Master of Predicaments is a really fun card that I've put in a bunch of different decks over the years, but again, it fits really well here. Our opponents are going to have to guess, and sometimes we just get to put something huge onto the battlefield for free. Mnemonic Wall is just like Archaeomancer, another way to return an instant or sorcery to our hand. Sakashima the Imposter is there to copy our commander. Now, the reason we've got a few of these is because they do work exponentially well. The more copies we have, the more attack triggers we're going to get, which means that then we're going to get that many more end of turn triggers, which is just going to snowball really quickly. Snapcaster Mage allows us to rebuy an instant or sorcery from the graveyard for more value. Spark Double is another way to copy our commander for even more triggers. Sphinx Ambassador doesn't really trigger our commander, but it does work spiritually with what the deck is doing since it's basically a guessing card, and being able to basically cast Bribery for free seems very powerful. Sphinx of Clear Skies is another really powerful effect in this deck. We should almost always have 3 colors for domain, so this means that we could be drawing up to 3 cards with this, but probably mostly we're going to be drawing 2 or 1. It's still pretty good. Sphinx of Uthun is another good Sphinx that's going to trigger our commander and again cast a Fact or Fiction effect. The 7th Doctor has a really cool effect. The first couple of times we use it, we're probably just going to be getting clues, but then it gets tougher and tougher for our opponents the more artifacts we have. Unesh Cryosphinx Sovereign is there because we have a few Sphinxes, and every Sphinx that we play, including itself, is basically going to give us another kind of Fact or Fiction effect. This is really good with what our commander is doing and allows us to repeatedly use this kind of ability. Moving on to sorceries, we have Boneyard Parlay, and this is a really good reanimation spell in this deck. You get to choose the creatures from any graveyard, so you can get the most powerful things in there. That means that you're always going to get at least a couple of good things. Brilliant Ultimatum is again a Fact or Fiction kind of effect, but the twist in this one is that you just get to cast the stuff for free. You can, of course, hit lands with this, so it can be super bad if you're unlucky, but if you hit well, it can be a very powerful effect. Death or Glory is going to be a fun one, even though we're not running that many creatures. creatures, we do actually dump quite a lot of cards into our graveyard in this deck, so this can actually reanimate a decent amount of things. Do or Die is extremely cheap for a card that's going to wipe half the creatures a player controls off the board. You don't get control over which they keep, but it's still a very powerful effect. Exsanguinate is there to help us finish the game, seeing as we don't have that many dedicated finishes. Irenicus's Vile Duplication is another way to get a copy of our commander for more trigger fun. Make an Example is a very powerful effect. It's like Do or Die, but instead of just one opponent, it's each opponent, which is very, very strong. Not only that, but you get to choose the pile, which means that you get a little bit more control over it than with Do or Die. Nanogene Conversion is absolutely amazing. If you have a few creatures on the board, you suddenly just get to make them all into copies of your commander, or into copies of a big Sphinx if your opponents don't have any blockers, and then when you swing with all of those commanders, you're going to get all of the triggers from them, and then at the end of turn, you're going to get all of the triggers again, because this doesn't wear off until the cleanup step. So this can be an amazing finisher in the right situation. Even just having 4 creatures out, that means you're going to get 4 attack triggers for your commander, and that means that each commander is then going to see those 4 attack triggers, and at the end step, they're going to trigger 4 times each, which is 32 life loss for each opponent. Quantum Misalignment is there again to give us extra copies of our commander, and Burial Rites should be quite good because we are putting a lot of cards into our graveyard, so we can either cast it for the front side or we can just flash it back from the back side to get a bit of value. Moving on to instants, we have Epiphany at the Drown Yard, which we can pour quite a bit of mana into. The way our commander is worded, we can actually do this on our opponent's turn and still get it to trigger. Fact or Fiction is one of the classic pile cards, and it's going to be very good in this deck, seeing as we get to trigger our commander with it. Fortune's Favor is another Fact or Fiction effect, which is a little bit different because one of the piles is face down. Hostile Negotiations is a super fun new card because you get to flip one of the piles up and your opponents choose which pile you get to keep. This makes for a lot of mind games. Soren's Ransom is a similar card, except your opponent is going to be the one looking at them and deciding which pile is face up, which makes it more difficult for you. And Truth or Tale is another kind of Fact or Fiction effect, except you're only going to be getting 1 card no matter what, but it's still great because it's a cheap way to trigger our commander. For artifacts, we have Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots, which are pretty important in a deck like this because our commander is definitely going to be a target, and the deck doesn't really do that much without our commander out. And Whip of Erebos is going to ensure that we can gain a little bit of life back here or that, so that we can stay alive long enough to finish off our opponents. For enchantments, we have Fight or Flight. This is a very annoying card that our opponents are probably going to want to get off the table, but it does give us a lot of survivability and slows the game down, which is kind of what we want. The Toymaker's Trap is a really cool guessing card that I look forward to playing with, and it also fits the theme very well in a deck that's headed by the Toymaker. Finally, we have Warlock class. We're mostly interested in the 3rd mode here, but the 1st and 2nd mode are decent as well. Once we get to the 3rd mode though, this is going to make our opponents lose a lot of life with our commander. And moving on to lands, I wanted to highlight 3 lands that make it more difficult for our commander to be blocked, because we do need to attack with him a lot, and those are Rogue's Passage, which makes sure that he can get through completely unblocked. Shizo Death's Storehouse is going to make him only blockable by black creatures or artifact creatures, which should make it possible for you to find one opponent at least where he can swing through. And the Blackgate is going to let you attack a player that has the most life, so as long as you're not the player with the most life, you should always have someone to attack with this. So there you have it. That has been the Celestial Toymaker deck tech. What do you think about this one? I'm looking forward to playing with this because it has a lot of cards that I like playing anyway, that I've tried to make work in other decks, but they don't necessarily work. And this deck is just tailor-made for those kind of cards. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about this one and making my opponents guess what's going on with my deck. What do you think though? Are there any cards you would have added or any things you think I shouldn't have included? Let me know in the comment section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.